Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be going ahead and doing our crowdfunding. So once again, this is a show where we're going to be talking about all sorts of different crowdfunding projects that are coming up, as well as some that have entered the library. Now today we're going to be talking about 3 specific games, as well as a new game that has entered the library arena contest. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first game that I want to talk about is Mythic Mischief. Now, Mythic Mischief is an interesting title where it promises to be this fun fantasy, adventure, but not what you're typically used to. This one's going to put you in a high school. And in this high school, it's going to be all about getting these tomes from a librarian. Now, when I first heard about this game, it really reminded me of the movie Monsters University. So you have in that movie, there's a challenge where they literally have to go through this library, not get caught by the librarian. It's this giant creature. That's the same thing that's happening here. You're a group of these kids, whether it be Frankenstein's monsters, or you are some zombies or some ghosts. You have all these different asymmetric factions here. Each one's going to play a little bit differently with their own special power. And you're going to be using them in order to kind of upgrade your effects as well as get all of your enemies' pieces caught. And that's the game. You are really just trying to do your best to manipulate this Tome Keeper in order to capture your opponent's units. So there he is right there, the Tome Keeper himself. So you have all these interesting choices that you're going to have to be taking, and you do this through this dice manipulation system. So these dice are all going to be counters, so you're not actually rolling them, but you're going to be using them to modify what's happening on this board. So the library is going to detail basically where the Tome Keeper is and where your own characters are. And then you're going to have these before and after lunch cards that dictate where the Tome Keeper is actually going to move off to. And then on your board itself, you'll have all these slots that indicate kind of the power levels of your actions. And then these actions are going to allow you to manipulate the board, move your characters. You have lots of different choices. And once again, each character is going to have their own unique power section as well, which is going to let them do something in addition. So that's the game. Once again, this game it's beautiful. So just straight off the bat, I love that they're using the game tray systems here. I really enjoy that they have this really fun theme, and the testimonials for this game are huge. Every person really likes this. But the biggest thing that I saw when I was looking at the content for this was it was compared to Santorini. Now, Santorini is an abstract game where you are very similarly, you have your own personal power, but you're playing this base core game. And so you're trying to figure out how to best implement your power in order to take out the opponent. So very straightforward, very simple. Once again, Santorini is a very high praised game. But this one in particular, first off, it seems a little bit longer. But it does introduce something random, which are those after lunch cards, the after lunch cards. So the after lunch cards are going to add some unpredictability and randomness to the game. And I think that's huge. I really enjoy abstract games that have some unpredictability and randomness, because if you don't have that, people can really just sit there and kind of map out their turn. It becomes chess-like almost, where you're able to sit there, plan many turns in advance, and get to a point where you can't lose just because of that order of operations. And that is something that I really dislike, are perfect information games. Santorini falls into that category where you can really map out things. But Mythic Mischief it's offering something that I think is interesting and different, and has that fun factor and that unpredictability factor where you can make risky plays and you don't really have to plan that much on your turn, because even if you do, there's still going to be that element of randomness that could throw things for the loop, which I think allows you to kind of be a little bit more lax while you play. And I think that's really interesting. Now, the replayability is huge. The components are really interesting. I really like the effects of the different characters, and you can actually give it a try on Tabletop Simulator now if you want to give it a try. Now, once again, I think that the game itself, though, it does look a little long as opposed to some abstracts. This one is going to have you manipulating little pieces, going from round to round to round, and really taking your time on your turn to make sure you're setting yourself up. And I think that can lead to some long player turns. So that's something to be aware of if you like quick, snappy decisions. I think something like Santorini might be better because you're able to move quickly to different places. But this one seems to be a lot more calculated with the actions you're taking, because you just have so many things you can do. Once again, you have those giant action trackers here that you're going to be using to do different things, which is going to give you a lot of choices in how you're actually reacting and interacting with the board. So lots of choices here, interesting gameplay. But one other thing to notice are the designers of the game. So if we check the BGG page, we actually get the design team here. And the design team of Mythic Mischief is the same design team that brought us Moonrakers. So this is Ivy Studios. So the designers here are Austin Harrison, Max Anderson, and Zach Dixon. Now, this design team, you may have no idea who they are or what they've done, but Ivy Studios is a team that has created many different games. And this game in particular that I want to kind of talk about and bring up here is Moonrakers. Now, Moonrakers was Ivy Studios' first project. It's a beautiful game, great production, a deck building game with negotiation, where you're going to be trying to get points and do your best to kind of combo out cards to complete these projects or these missions. Now, this game in particular, I didn't like at all. I thought that this game it was kind of a bare bones deck builder. The deck builder itself was very straightforward. You play cards to let you play more cards, to let you gain power tokens, and then you use those power to complete these objectives and missions. You have some modifier cards in the form of crew where you're building your deck up, and that was kind of it. There wasn't a lot of cool deck building style here, just very straightforward. But on top of that, the way the game worked was you were trying to do your best to complete these missions to earn points, and it was a race to 10 points. Now, that being said, during the game, there were factors that could allow you to lose points. So the points were kind of hard to come by, so you could potentially gain and lose points. But then the other thing was the negotiation itself. Whenever you went on a mission, you could ask other people to join you by offering them parts of the objectives that you were working on. So maybe you'd give them some of the points you would earn, maybe you would give them some of the coins you would earn, and then you would all go on this adventure. Each player would roll one of these danger dice if that's what they agreed on, and they would do their best to try to overcome whatever obstacle happened. And then based on everybody taking their turn and it's like talking and playing, they would potentially win this thing. Now, it sounds really cool in theory, right? Negotiation game with deck building. However, in gameplay, that just means that this game is going to take forever. So first off, the game takes forever. The gameplay is really simple, and it's honestly not that satisfying. And those were the things that really I was like, oh man, this sounds like it would work so well, but in practice, not that exciting. And that's where I'm kind of torn on Mythic Mischief here. Now, right now, we are currently backing the project because the testimonials for this game are kind of out of this world with how much praise it's receiving. And so for right now, we are going to be currently backing it because there is a reward here. But my hope is to get some more plays in of the tabletop simulator version of it and really make a decision there. So I don't really like playing digital games. But I may have to give it a try here just to see what this one is like. So that's Mythic Mischief, the first one on our list. It looks wonderful. It has a fantastic theme, fantastic testimonials, and I hope that this studio and these designers have taken the criticism and feedback from their past games and put them into this new project. So that's what I'm really hoping for, and I hope that this just becomes something that we can really enjoy and have a blast with. So that's the first game on the list. That is Mythic Mischief. Now, the next game is one that I've been interested in for a while, and this is going to be Black Rose Wars. So Black Rose Wars just recently came out from Kickstarter, from Ludus Magnus Studios. And this Kickstarter in particular focused on mage versus mage combat. Now, this is something that we've seen a lot in many different games. Take a book of spells, but in this form, your deck is a deck builder. And the way that the game system works is in the base game, you are going to be going around and you are going to basically be slinging spells and trying to accumulate cubes into different rooms. And each room that you are a part of, you're going to get points on how much you've destroyed it, essentially. And based on how much of the room you've helped destroy, you're going to get points. Now, the other thing is this is a mage versus mage. So you're going to be slinging spells at other opponents. And the more that you damage the opponents with your spells, the more points you're going to get out of that. So there's kind of a health tracker on the top of each player. And each time you deal damage, you're going to put a cube on that health tracker. And when that character is dead, based on how many of your cubes are on the health tracker, you get that many points. So I like that it's an interesting system where not only are you playing the area control on the board itself, on the different rooms you're destroying, but you're also going to be playing area control on all of your opponents. So you want to be the person dominating their health track, which I think is really funny. So it encourages you to kind of like double dip into lots of different enemies, which I think is hilarious, but also makes you kind of keep track of, where your position is on each of those enemies. So really funny how you can really shoot to the lead by just dealing damage all over the place. And I like that this is a game where whenever you defeat somebody, they're not gone forever. They respawn, you get your points for taking them out, but they're still in the game and you just keep on going. Now, this one is a new edition of the game, Rebirth, because instead of destroying the rooms, you're going to be reconstructing them. So this kind of, in the story-wise version of this, you are coming in after the Black Rose has basically destroyed everything, and it's your job to be the person in charge of restructuring it. So whenever you deal damage to a room, it's not damage, it's like rebirth points, and so you're trying to reconstruct it. I think it's kind of a weird theme. I think the first one worked a little bit more hand in hand, but this one, it makes sense. Now, the big changes between this one and the original one are basically everything has this nice white sheen to it. Everything is a little bit more streamlined to make a bit more sense. It's kind of a redone version of the base game. However, the base game and this game are compatible, so you can play cross content if you want to carry your characters over, and you can play with the same mages that you enjoy in the first one if you have that first one. But I think looking at this project, I think that you don't really need the first one if you are getting this one. But if it's something that you find yourself enjoying, you can find copies of the original just out and about. You also have opportunities to get all of the expansions here with Kickstarter exclusive content, and there are a bunch of stretch goals coming in. So this project is doing extremely well. You have lots of choices here, but I forgot to mention one thing with how you actually are going to be casting your spells in the game. So this game is actually a programming game where on your turn, you're going to be prepping your spells into this line in front of you, as well as action tokens. And then on your turn, you can either use your first prep spell, you can use your first press spell in an action, or you can use both action tokens. And these action tokens are used to activate the rooms and kind of activate basic actions. And then the spells are whatever you prepped. And I think it's really cool where everybody is kind of anticipating their actions beforehand, kind of, like I said, programming, and then setting those plans out to see what will happen. And I think that's really awesome. I think that's fun. There's a lot of games that I enjoy like that. A lot of drafting games I like because they're kind of setting up the dominoes for yourself and watching them play out. This one is very literal, and you're kind of really wanting to read not only the board, but your other opponents. Not only are you anticipating what each mage can do based on the character that they've chosen, but also how those mages will interact with the different fields. There's also some really cool ways that you can summon monsters and all sorts of interesting ways. It's very similar to something like Mage Wars, where you're going to be bringing out all your spells, and your spells could do all sorts of fun things. And it just looks really cool. I think that the design is really fun. I think the deck building looks very straightforward and not extremely difficult to wrap your head around and get into. This one looks like a blast to me. Now, the testimonials for this one are not extremely high, as we saw in Mythic Mischief. They're very mixed. A lot of people say it's kind of like a middle-of-the-road style game, but also a lot of people saying that this is one of their favorite skirmish games, because once again, it's not just about killing the people, but it's about that area control, which really adds to a skirmish style game. And I think that's really neat. And I think that the beautiful miniatures and the artwork are really going to add to this entire experience. So that is Black Rose Wars. Have you seen this game? Is this one that you're interested in? I'd love to hear what you think on Black Rose Wars. And if you've played the original, if you're excited for Rebirth, just anything about this one. Right now, we're not currently backing this one. I know that the original is out, so I would like to give it a try before I jump onto this route. We have many different skirmish games in the library already, so I'm not sure if this is one that we need. But however, let's go ahead and talk about one of those skirmish games that is in the library and what we've been doing so far with it. So the skirmish game that recently entered the library that we have heard nothing but positive praise, and it's solo, it's cooperative, and it's competitive, is Arena the Contest. And now that I've played it a couple times, I've played it about 5 times now, we've got it in last week, I can say that this game is pretty dang fun. So this is a skirmish game where you take a team of 4 characters, and you're going to pit those 4 characters against your opponents. And these 4 characters are all going to fall on a different role. Now, the game itself has you playing on either pre-constructed maps with all these terrain printed on the board, or you can, as a team, the people who are actually playing, design the dungeon as you see fit and then pick your characters. So I really like that there's a lot of customization here, but there's a way that you could just get started and get playing right away. And I think that's one of the strengths of this game, is that it can get played so quickly and it is so fun. And like I said, you are going to be picking your teams, and these teams teams can consist of these tacticians, your DPS, your damage per second. You've got your healers, your tanks, but they're all of these amazing characters with awesome designs. But the differences between them are the abilities themselves. So each character has 4 ability cards that you're going to be using, and these ability cards detail the different attacks that they have. Now, you don't really need these ability cards because they're printed on the characters themselves, but they're used as trackers, and I think that's really neat. So if I play a card that, will wound somebody, I put the card next to that person to show that they're wounded. Or if I play a card that buffs myself, that lets me get toughness for a turn, I can put that in front of me to give myself this condition. And the cards are reminders, but they also allow you to kind of plan and look at them while your opponent is taking their turn. Now, the game system itself is very straightforward. When it's your move, you're going to be using 1 movement action. You'll move around the board, and then you're going to be using an attack action. And you have 2 choices on attacks. You have 2 basic attacks and 2 special attacks. And your special attacks are once per game. But the special attacks are super good, super bonkers, but you can only use them once every other round. So you have this token that you flip to show that you can or cannot use your special. Now, the special moves, when you start playing this game, you'll notice that the special moves are ones that you're going to want to be activating consistently, because you have 4 characters, 8 special moves, and then you only have a certain amount of time to start using them because your opponents are going to start using theirs, and those special moves are very, very strong. You are going to be able to do lots of big damage, and your characters do not have the most health. So sometimes you may have a character that dies with a special move, and you might feel really silly. So the first game we played, we were kind of reserved and not wanting to use these special moves. But the more we played, the more we realized, oh, we just got to start slinging these ASAP. So I really like that this encourages you to use these awesome powers, and it's just straight up fun because every character has their own unique way of battling and fighting, and I think that's really fun. So it's really all about timing which special move you're going to be using, and then knowing when to take a break and when to stop. Because some of the special moves are also like counter moves, which is cool. So that adds some interesting choices with, ooh, do I use my special now or do I predict? But the other really cool aspect of this game, in addition to these combat characters, you're also going to get what are called heroic actions. Now, heroic actions are a set of 7 generic cards that each player is going to get. And that player is going to be able to choose 2 of those heroic actions. Now, the heroic actions themselves are this is just the artwork for one, but they differentiate in like lots of different abilities. You have one that deals 5 damage to all opponents, lets you move them, an earthquake. You have this one here, which is going to let you heal one of your friends for 25 health and bring them back to battle. You also have one that just lets you teleport a character anywhere and deal 20 damage. But each player has access to 2 of these. And so there's a bit of prediction and choice when it comes to the map, because maybe that earthquake's really good. You could push people into lava, or you can move people around, or maybe saving that heal 25 is really important for, bringing back one of your key characters. There's lots of cool choices here with customizing your team, not just on the characters, but also in cooperation with these action cards. And I think that's so, so fun. Now, the characters themselves are a blast. The battle is straightforward and fun, and the system and the ability to make awesome plays is there, and it's so cool. Now, we did try some of the expansion content. One of the expansions that we tried was the artifact expansion, and these introduce these items that you're going to be drafting at the start of the game. You have 6 power points that you're going to be using, and each of these items has a power level rating from 1 to 3. You can only have one of the 3 items because they are that powerful, but I really like how you can pick items that are going to customize your character a little bit more. This one in particular I thought was really cool. It can turn a melee character into a ranged character, which is just so fun. It opens up a lot of opportunities. So they're very simple changes, but with the correct setup or with the correct characters, they can make for a lot of fun. And I thought that was awesome. So I really like the artifact expansion because, yes, it's choice, but it's not a crazy amount of choice. Now, unlike the artifact expansion, the second expansion we tried out was the scroll expansion. And the scrolls are a deck of 12 cards, and you're going to draft. Each player is going to draft 12 of these cards as they, before they start. And they're going to make this deck of cards that all has new special abilities. Now, these special abilities are not as strong as the regular game special abilities, but they do still consume that special token. So it's all about, once again, timing of, ooh, is it better if I use this scroll now, or do I use my actual awesome special ability? And when we played, we found that this was more of a paralyzing choice and more of an awkward choice, because a lot of the times you don't really want to use these scrolls, but you kind of feel obliged to because you have a hand limit of 3 of them. And if you ever draw more, you're going to have to discard down to 3. So it felt kind of bad when you didn't, but it turned out that it was better to just not use them because you didn't have to like ruin the efficiency of what you were doing. So it was interesting. I would not recommend the scrolls. First off, they're really hard to implement. The first thing is you actually have to look through all of the cards. So there's 24 different scroll cards. There's 24 scroll cards that you'll be picking, and then there's I think 40 of them. So you have lots of different choices, and each scroll is different. So you're really sitting there and thinking, "Ooh, what's going to be best for these characters?" And then you shuffle them up, you draw 3, and then you assign them to characters. It honestly just adds more complexity than it's worth, and that was my overall takeaway. Now, that being said, the skirmish mode is wonderful. I really like the skirmish mode, but recently, that was just wave 1 what delivered. So wave 1 delivered the skirmish mode, the head-to-head, but also including in that skirmish mode in the base box, you also receive a campaign mode. And the campaign puts you in the world of Tanares. Now, Tanares is such an interesting fantasy world. So if you read the campaign guide, I was able to play a couple campaign games. If you read the campaign guide, you are able to see that this world is very different. So the whole premise is this is a fantasy land. Classic, very classic. However, what has happened is a very peaceful utopian city was really showing great examples to all the people around them. And then these giant deities came down, not deities, sorry, a giant war force came and basically destroyed this peaceful society, the society that was all about the betterment of the people. Now, the deities of the land, these giant dragons, came down and basically said, hey, why would you do this? That was terrible. Why would you destroy such a progressive city? From now on, if anybody ever commits atrocities like this, if there's ever a war like this, we are going to cause some form of natural disaster, and it's going to kill everybody involved. And so that was like I forget the name of it, but it's like the curse of the land. So anytime there was an uprising or a large amount of people fighting another large amount of people, all those people essentially get wiped out. Now, years go by and people are like, that's not real. There's no way. And of course, naturally, they get their forces, they go to war, and boom, catastrophe happens, a tsunami, a hurricane, a earthquake. All the people are consumed by the land. And that's terrifying. So the people realize this is happening. And, with this being said, the structure of the government in the game basically is there's only one army and they're in charge of everybody. And that's so interesting because if there's only one army, there's no reason and no way an uprising can happen because, it's not 2 large groups of people, just one large group of people policing everybody. And that's so interesting. So I'm just really curious as to how that started. There's like this Iron King that's kind of responsible for this, but you have this giant army that's basically in control of everything, and there's no way it can be challenged because there can be no wars, because otherwise a catastrophe will happen. So it's a very interesting setting. And instead of having wars to settle conflicts and stuff, they use the arena, and that's where the skirmish comes in. So instead of having diplomats or giant giant armies, they're going to send warriors to the arena to solve their problems. So instead of 2 giant armies fighting, it's just 2 people, and these 2 people kind of have the fate of their entire kingdom on their hands. And I think it's a really interesting system. So I kind of like that, and I like how they're able to incorporate the arena into the story. But the story mode itself is really cool. You're going to be going from mission to mission, and on these missions, you are basically going to be running through one of these dungeons, and you have lots of these components that you're going to be setting up. And these dungeons are going to have a guide that's going to show you what enemies to set up, what characters you can use. And as you play, you're going to earn experience that are going to allow you to bring in more cards. Now, the things that you're going to earn experience-wise are additional cards from other characters, which is kind of neat. You can kind of customize your person, give them some range, some healing. It gives you lots of choices. You also are going to have these level up cards that you can actually just straight up spend, which give you very minor buffs, but I think over the long term of a big campaign, they could be big, like healing or extra movement, things like that. Now, the scenarios themselves look something like this, where it's going to have the map on the right, and then on the left, all the events that are going to happen on that map. And whenever something happens, something specific, one of your objectives usually, then an event will trigger, and that'll usually populate the board with more things. Now, in addition to the map, it's very straightforward. You're going to be using your characters to complete objectives. But in addition to the map, between missions, there is a stack of these mission cards that are going to give you tiny little puzzles and things that you're going to be taking a look at. And I think it's really neat how you have these mini challenges that could affect the main game. Now, this is kind of very D&D style, where you may have to find a key or a combination for a lock or solve a riddle or things like that. And I think that's really fun. It adds a little bit of interesting choices before a battle that's outside of it, but adds a little bit of flavor as well. And I really like that. Now, that being said, I won't spoil anything here, but the story itself is very much playing in this world and this idea of this conflict that's happening and the control. And I think that's really awesome. I think it's a fun story. I think it actually makes sense. It's one that I'm interested in. There's a lot of these big campaign games that I'm just ignoring the story at some points and just playing, but things like Madara and things like this are stories that I'm actually interested in and I'm excited to continue into. So Tanares is one that I'm really enjoying, and that's one that's just entered the library. And the thing that I'm most excited about next is the Dragon versus Dragon. So this one here, the Dragon Collection. So you actually get to control these giant beasts, and you get to fight not only against each other, but you can also use them as bosses. I think that's so cool. And we have the painted version. It's just, woo, they look so good. So excited to jump into that Dragon Collection and really see what it's all about. But the last project that we're going to talk about is actually a expansion for this game. So this is going to be Tanares RPG. Now, Tanares RPG is not only a board game supplement, but it's also its own RPG setting in 5th edition. So that world that I talked to you about of the no conflict zones, essentially, and the catastrophes that can happen, and if they do happen, is here on full display. So you can play Dungeons and Dragons in the current edition, 5e, using the Tanares world. And so that means that you're going to have lots of interesting choices and characters and different classes that are unique to this as opposed to original Dungeons and Dragons. Now, that being said, this is a interesting entry point for people who are just curious about RPGs as well, because it offers a solo mode that you can play with the RPG's format, which I think is really cool. You can really, because a lot of RPGs are the preparation and creating your character and kind of mapping out the numbers and understanding your action economy and the different things that go into what makes a solid character, where the other half is the role-playing aspect and actually just enjoying just the fun. Now, my experience with RPGs in general, I am not the biggest fan. So every time I've played an RPG, the paperwork portion of the RPG gets in the way of my enjoyment of the actual interaction and excitement. This one seems to have that same thing where, once again, it is just 5e, so you're going to have that same system. So this is probably not one that I'm going to back for the RPG stuff. Once again, it's in a system that I have played before and it's just not one that I'm really interested in. So that is the RPG side. However, the board game side of this is really cool. So as we talked about in the original Tanares and original Arena of the Contest, you're going to be getting these campaigns. The campaigns are very straightforward, but very fun. The RPG here just introduces 3 different tiers. You can go with the RPG. This is going to get you all the RPG content. The minis, this is the one. This one is going to be using the expansions. This is going to be giving you expansions for the board games. And that is so awesome. So you have all of these characters that you can use as you play, and then new heroes that you're going to put it in the contest with new abilities, new bosses that you can fight during your adventures. I think that's so awesome. And you have some choices here. You can go with just the board game stuff. You can go with just the books. I love that you have all of these options. Now, that being said, I am in this for just the miniatures and the cards, because that will allow us to incorporate it all into Arena of the Contest. And the amount of replayability is key in Arena because you're always picking teams of 4. And I think that's really important because each of these characters is so different. We've played this, I think, 4 times the competitive mode, and we've already gone through most of the different characters, which is crazy because there's already so many different characters. But with a big roster and the amount of selections, you're going to be kind of churning through those different characters, and it's fun to just have all these different combinations and different ideas. I'm excited to see what they are going to be able to give us for more interesting choices for the arena. And I like that. I'm excited. So right off the bat, we have a golden dragon that you can use. This is for the boss battles, as well as if you want to play that dragon v dragon mode. And I think that's pretty sweet. You also have the character packs here, which are going to give you 6 more different villains, which is great, right? Or sorry, not 6 villains. This is going to give you 6 new characters for the arena. And then up next, we've got the Classes Pack, which is just another 4 different heroes for the arena. And I love this. I love that you have so many options just going into this, and each of these is going to come with those full hour cards for the characters themselves, but also just more choices. That being said, we also have Villain Pack, which is going to give you more and more choices. So these are more of those boss minis, as well as the Mystical Pack, which is just more characters. And the Mystical Pack here actually has redone versions of the characters that are already in the box to make them a bit more balanced, which I think is awesome. So you have the King there, the Glorious Emperor, as well as the Shapeshifter. So right now they do have characters in Tanares, but I won't lie, they're a little OP. They're like special characters. You can't really use them in, fair fights, but they are pretty good if you want to make sure that somebody is a little bit more. If somebody needs a handicap, those might be good characters for you to use. So that's pretty much everything. If you're going for the board game style to get for the game, you're going to want to get all of the different miniatures for the new characters that are going to be entering the arena. You're going to want to get all of the heroes to add additional variety in your skirmish games as well as the campaign games. But I think that this is really cool because this is a game that you are going to get played. It has 4 different ways that you can play it. You can play it solo, you can play it cooperative, you can play the skirmish, you can play the epic campaign. I guess there's 5. And then you can also play the one-off cooperative scenarios or solo scenarios. And I think that's awesome. I think that you have lots of ways to play this game. The combat is simple, the combat is fun, the combat is interesting, and I love the actual tactical decisions and the movement in this game. You're constantly thinking about the terrain. It honestly reminds me a lot of the positioning in something like Kingdom Death Monster, where it does matter if you're like one space away from this thing, or it does matter if you're close range. You really have to be careful about where you are. So the positioning is very important. And I like that. Sometimes one game recently, Folklore the Affliction, that one, when I was playing that, I felt like it did not matter where you were on the game. Your goal every round was run forward, hit the guy, and that was kind of it. There wasn't really big tactical decisions. Here, the way that the retaliate and the break attacks work, you want to make sure that you are positioning yourself in ways where characters can't hit you while you're trying to do a ranged attack, or you're able to trigger your effects of all of your different abilities of your characters, because some characters get advantages for taking out people if they're within 5 spaces, or some characters have to hit something while they're alone to it adjacent, or some characters can deal 4 damage to another character if they hit on their first hit. So you have a lot of things to consider when it comes to positioning, and I really like that. All right, and that's everything for this week's crowdfunding. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that some of this was informative to you, that you can make a better decision on the things that you're looking at on crowdfunding platforms. So for me, right now, we're currently backing Mythic Mischief. I think that this one looks really interesting, lots of high testimonial, but I'm a little worried about the designers as well as just the overall feel of the game. So very curious to see how this one's going to pan out. I'm going to hopefully get some plays of it on Tabletop Simulator and then make a more informed decision. In addition, Arena the Contest, the expansions for that, definitely going to be getting those. They look amazing. And Black Rose War is one that I'm so on the fence about. It's one that I really want to give a try. I love the system. I love that area control. And I like how it's really kind of spreading out the love when it comes to the mage versus mage combat. So curious to see how these all come out, but that's everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. What did you think of the show? Are there any games that you think that I should have checked out? Anything you want to see next week? Any comments on these 3 games that we covered today? I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Side Game Strong.